Welcome back to my YouTube channel if you're returning, and welcome if this is your first time. Very good to have you on here. My name is Onese and I'm a postgrad student in London. I make videos about education, career, personal development, living and studying abroad, and the likes. In today's video, I will be talking about how a master's degree differs from an undergrad degree from my experience and the research that I have done. I'd just like to add that I've done 2 undergraduate degrees and a master's degree, so I have some level of knowledge in this area. And starting my master's, there were some things that were shocking to me. So I'm going to share all of that in this video and the differences that I observed between the two. Before we get right into it, I'd just like to encourage you to like this video if you enjoy it, to share with people that you know might be interested in doing a master's degree, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Well, let's get right into it. The very first thing I would like to talk about is entry requirements. So the entry requirements for an undergrad degree differs from that for a master's, in that the difference is slight, in that for a master's degree the application process might be harder, or there might be more requirements for entry than for an undergrad. So for instance, when I applied for my undergrad, I wasn't required, and this might differ based on university, but when I applied for my second undergrad here in the UK, I wasn't required to submit a written work. I just had to do a personal statement and show I had gotten the required grades and the likes. But for a master's degree, one thing that was different, especially for this, and this is specific to the university I attended for masters, University College London, I had to produce a written work as well, in addition to my personal statement and other entry requirements. So it was a written work to write on an area of law that is of interest, or there's a development in about 1,000 words. So I think that was one step above what I did for undergrad. Another thing could be, and this also depends on university, the entry requirements for grades, or rather the required grade, could be higher than what you had for undergrad. So maybe for undergrad you needed A levels, A, B, or something like that, for instance. But maybe for the university you're applying for masters, they might require a 2-1 or higher. So the entry requirements in that sense could be higher than that for undergrad. And then for some master's degree, maybe some very specific ones, the spaces could not be as many, or would not be as many as the spaces available for an undergrad in that field of study. So the places might be smaller, the number of slots available for students on that particular course might be smaller, so which makes the competition a tad bit tougher than for undergrad. So yeah, a master's degree, the entry requirements is just a step above that for undergrad. I would say the competition is slightly more than that for undergrad, and there are slim chances, depends on if you meet all the entry requirements, of being rejected or accepted for the course. It depends. And then also for entry, in terms of entry requirements, of course, to do a master's, you need to, I believe, for many universities to hold a degree already, so a bachelor's or an undergrad degree, or a form of diploma, for you to be able to go to the master's level. Now, for some courses, they would require that you have a degree in an undergraduate degree in a similar field for you to do a master's in that field. Or if you have an undergrad degree in a different field, you will have to prove why you want to do a master's in this field and show that you meet a certain grade requirement in order to be able to get on that master's course. So yeah, you need to have the foundational knowledge in a field of study to progress to a master's level in that field. Then, similar to entry requirements, I think one thing I have noticed is that the tuition cost for undergrad. Now, I'd just like to caveat this by saying, caveat what I'm about to say by saying that this might differ from country to country, from state to state, and from the school. It might differ based on the school's location and based on the school's ranking and the likes. But from what I found is that the master's the school fees for a master's degree is usually higher, the tuition cost rather is usually higher than that of undergrad. So for instance, a master's in law at, say, University of Leicester, where I did mine, the school fees for international students might be 16k, or for home students might be 9k. When you get to the master's level, it's like it doubles. So the school fees for home students might be 16k, international students 26k, and 26k in pounds. I'm referring to the pound, the currency of pounds, or the pound sterling currency. Yeah, you get the point. So the school fees is usually higher. Maybe say if you go to like a country where the school fees is lower, maybe the starting school fees for undergrad is lower, you see when you get to the master's level it is high. Some schools have some really high tuition costs for masters, some specific programs, say like MBA courses in specific university. Some go even up to almost 100k, say, dollars. But yeah, so what I paid for my undergrad in the UK, I paid like double the amount for a postgrad. Yes, about double the amount for a postgrad degree. So bear that in mind when like applying or thinking of doing a master's degree. Then thirdly, which is the bulk of this video, the nature of study. So what I've found is for undergrad, and I'm speaking from my experience in terms of law, undergrad degree in law is more like foundational. I see it as building blocks. When you start a master's degree in law is when you realize, oh, some of the things I learned in undergrad are relevant because they're built like at a master's degree, you're building on that. So undergrad is more foundational, building blocks, basic general knowledge. So if you do an undergrad in law, for instance, you will have to do like all different types of law. So criminal law, equity and trust in the UK, tort, administrative and constitutional law, contract law. So you're doing like both public and private law. But the thing about masters, when you get to the master's level, it gets more specialized and more detailed, more nuanced. So if you get to the master's level, you might do a general master's, but that's still specific, that's still specialized. So a general master's is not having a specialism, so doing like different modules that fall into different like fields of law. Say for instance, a module from public law, a module from private law, and things like that. But even if you do a general LLM or a specific one, the knowledge is more specialized than an undergrad. And that's why I said undergrad is like building blocks. So a master's degree is more nuanced. There's so much attention to detail for law, there's just so many details, so many parts. And what I learned is that it is building on undergrad. So for instance, if you do an undergrad degree in law in the UK and you do a master's in law in the UK, let's say specialism in commercial law, your knowledge of contract law is so foundational to what you will do at the master's level in commercial law, because every of the modules in commercial law, contracts is like the building block. You need contracts. No matter how complicated a deal is, no matter how complicated a commercial transaction is, there will still be a contract, an agreement between two or more parties for that transaction to take place. And so if you don't have the basic knowledge of contract principles, it will be harder to grasp or deal with the more nuanced aspects of maybe say commercial contract. And that's why I said a master's is more specific. So on my master's degree, I just wondered, like, people that didn't do contract law, didn't study law, like, how are you understanding all these concepts? Because I remember for some of my modules, our professor even had to like take us back, remind us of some of the things we learned in contracts, the foundational principles, what makes a contract, damages for like when there's been a breach of contract and the likes. So yeah, I would say that for masters, you really need to like pay attention to what you're learning in undergrad, because when you get a master's degree, it will be very essential. Like if you're on your undergrad now and you're watching this, pay attention in class. I can't tell you how many times in class I was like, oh, thank God I listened in tort class, thank God I listened in contract law class, because it came like second nature to me, some of these things. So I could then focus on the more nuanced aspects because the foundational aspect was already there. So yeah, shout out to my undergrad teachers. I'm glad I paid attention. Then the next point I will say is that for undergrad, of course, is longer. So here in the UK, standard and undergrad is 3 years. But interestingly, if you're getting a second degree, second undergrad, which is what I did, an undergrad in law, you can have it for lesser years. So I did my law degree for 2 years instead of the standard 3 years in the UK, because I just learned all the foundational modules and 1 or 2 optional modules. I think it was even only 1 optional module. But anyway, for an undergrad, the number of years is longer, 3 to 4 standard, and the credits are more because you have longer years, you have more credits that you have to satisfy before you can get you can be awarded a degree in that field. But for masters, the standard is 1 or 2 years. Say if you're doing a research masters, you have 2 years, you have some modules or courses to take, and you have a longer period to write your research essay. But standard masters is 1 year, which means you have lesser credits to satisfy to be awarded the degree. But it also means that a lot is then squeezed into that 1 year. Like I said in the last point, if you're studying a course like law, it's more detailed, more specific, more nuanced, and there's so much more information. Although it's nuanced and it is more detailed, that just makes for so much more information, so much more things you have to learn. Like I would say so many turns and corners. I had one module that it was like you just had to keep your eyes out for turns and corners, because there's this law, or you can bypass it this way to form this transaction, blah 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 blah. So yeah, because the period of a master's degree is shorter, it is more intense because a lot is cramped into that period. And that takes me to my next point. I have noticed, this is a personal opinion, and from my personal experience, it might not be the same for every course. The workload for an undergrad law degree and a master's degree cannot be compared. I used to joke to myself during my master's year and say that if I studied this much in my undergrad, I would probably have had maybe 100 over 100, like, aced all of it if I studied this hard. Because on a master's degree, the workload is more, which means more hours of study, more information to learn. So if you study law already, you know that law is bulky, and you know that there's so much information to learn at undergrad. Now imagine 5 times that amount for masters. And I'll caveat this by saying it depends on the aspect of law you're doing at your master's degree. The reading materials may not be as much or as bulky, but it still requires just a greater level of critical thinking, understanding, engagement. And so yeah, that's one thing I noticed. The workload is more because it's nuanced, and you have to read a lot. You have to be prepared to do the readings. Some university are more reading oriented and focused, so you get more reading materials. Some may not have as much reading. It depends on the lecturers and the kind of reading they recommend, but either way, just be prepared to do more work than you did on your undergrad when you get to a master's level. Another difference between an undergrad and a master's degree, which I have learned, is the mode of teaching. So a master's degree is more independent study and research. On an undergrad, it depends on your university, but at the university I attended for undergrad, you had the option of not doing a dissertation or a research essay at the end of your degree. You had the option of doing shorter essays than a longer essay. So a dissertation would standard be maybe say 12 to 15k. I don't know if anyone ever had 15k, but around 12k average, 12k words average. And you had the option of not doing that, but doing 3 or 4 pieces of 3,000 word essays. On a master's degree, I believe that depending on your course, but I believe you almost always have to do a dissertation or a research essay or a thesis. No, not just a thesis, a dissertation or a research essay to crown up your degree. So it takes a bulk of your degree, which means that you're subject to much more research and independent study than you were on an undergrad. And you should be prepared for that. Similar to this point is the fact that on a master's degree, it's your hand is not held as much as it is on an undergrad. So for instance, in an undergrad, you will go to class and you're fed information, and then you go to read more and to topple on the information you're giving in class. It's you're giving pointers in class and then you go and build on that. On a master's, there's more initiative. You need to take more initiative, and there's more responsibility on you to kind of manage your master's. So typically you will be expected rather to read before classes. you'll be expected to take the initiative to do like the research even before classes, even before you have classes, and then you'll be expected to do the work to build on that. So like in my master's class, we're already starting from ground zero. There were some basic things that we needed to learn, will be taught, but we're expected to have come to class prepared, having done the reading and ready to engage. So the pressure to engage, I would say, is more on a master's degree than it is on an undergrad. Like you can get away on an undergrad, get away with going to class without reading on an undergrad degree, but at master's level, if you go to class without reading, there could be a point that you may feel left out, or you may feel like you're not fully following the conversation because you haven't prepared. So there's so much more research, independent study and preparation that you have to do, and you should be willing to take initiative. And similar to that, I would say that compared to my undergrad, my master's degree was more of like seminar like lectures. So not just a lecture where a lecturer comes and talks at you for like 1 hour straight. On the masters, they expect a level of engagement, they expect a level of discussion, because they don't expect you to be coming at like ground zero to learn everything, but rather engage, to critique what you're learning, to make suggestions. It's like you've done all the reading, okay, now let's come to class and talk about it. How do we go from here, type of thing. Of course, if there are more complicated things to be learned, they will teach you that, but then they expect you continue, like you pick it up and continue from there. And the further readings are a lot. So if you go to class without reading on a master's, it's unadvisable. Even if you don't engage, you don't discuss, just do the reading so you don't feel like you're left out or you don't know what is being spoken about in class. So yeah, a lot more initiative and independent study is needed on a master's degree. Finally, the last thing that I will say from me, and this might differ from university to university, I'll just add that disclaimer, would be that the level of support you get might not be the same that you get as an undergrad. So when you come as an undergrad for the first time to university, your hand is held a lot, sort of. You have a tutor, a personal tutor that you can take like your concerns to. Like you get more support, more one-on-one FaceTime with your lecturers and your tutors, so that you build your knowledge and you gain understanding of like the school system, what it's like to be at university, and just to settle into it. I do not think that same level of support is given on a master's degree. Of course, you get support, you get like a personal tutor or you get a year tutor, but you're not giving that same level of support that you give an undergrad student because you're at a master's level. So, and if you need the support, you're the one to take the initiative to reach out. So they're not compulsory like one-on-one meetings with your tutor, to discuss. Like you would reach out if you have a problem. Even from, and I caveat this by saying this is my experience, even at my uni, also for our research essay, we were not like overly supervised. We just had limited meetings with our supervisor. It's called an independent research essay. So the onus is on you to do the work. Like it's independent, so it's more of you and less of your hand being held and someone telling you, oh, do this, add that, remove this. Like it's not the same level of support. I would say the level of support drops by 15%. So, or supervision rather, not support. Supervision is the better word. You're not as supervised on your master's degree as you are on your undergrad, because of course it's an advanced level, it's postgraduate. So they expect you to like take control, take more initiative. And that's where like I would end it, that a master's degree, like any other degree at university, is what you make of it. A lot is left in your hands for you to take control of your learning process, how much more further reading you're willing to do, how much more you're willing to engage with the lecture materials, with your tutors, your supervisor, your lecturers, and how much study you're willing to put in. Your research essay is not controlled by another person or by your supervisor. It falls on you to like say, okay, this is the direction of the research I want to go, and you get like academic supervision where necessary, but more initiative is needed. And this is why I noticed that people often struggle, having spoken to a lot of people about this and myself too at the start of my master's. It was like so much responsibility was put on my shoulders, and how was I supposed to like manage this? So you need to be quick on your feet to take initiative, to take responsibility, to read ahead of class, to follow like the reading list your lecturers have given you and the guidance they've provided, and to build on that, to engage so you make the most out of your degree. And don't take a reactionary or passive approach to your master's. A master's degree needs an active approach and more initiative. So be willing to take that even right from the beginning of your master's degree, and you probably enjoy it much more. So yeah, that I think like the differences between an undergrad and a master's, and how to maximize the master's degree. I hope that you have enjoyed this video. If you think you found it helpful, please leave a comment. Let me know what you found helpful. If you notice any of that difference that I didn't capture, leave a comment and let me know. And if you've enjoyed it, please like. Don't forget to share and subscribe like I said at the beginning. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next. Bye.